welcome to another edition of Radio Hermetica. I'm your host, Andy Mercer, on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And we have an interesting show this evening. It's actually going to be a show in two parts. A bit later on, I'm going to be talking with friends who are putting together the Nameless Arte Conference for this year, where we're going to be talking about the guests that we've got already lined up for the conference. But that's in about half an hour or so. First half of the show, we're going to have a little chat with my good old friend Richard Ward, who's you've heard on here before. We're talking about a subject that I must admit I don't know an awful lot about, but it's something that seems to be quite popular and in vogue at the moment, and that's the Islamic or Middle Eastern Jinn, the origins of the term genie, I believe. But rather than me waffle about something I don't really know anything about, I'm going to hand over to my friend Richard. So, Richard, basically, what the hell are the Jinn?
The Jinn, or I mean, that's the most popular, sort of name for them. They go under various names: Jinn, Jinnan, and there's various plurals and singular versions depending on which language groups you look at. They're most popularly known now as part of Islamic law, where they are generally considered to be evil spirits that will, sort of prey on mankind, if you like. But their origins certainly are pre-Islamic, and there have been cases made for them being linked to various spirits within Babylonian and Chaldean Assyrian law and elsewhere in Mesopotamia, where people have shown various parallels. And this is not recent. I mean, this if you go back to the turn of the century, people like Campbell Thompson in his book on Semitic magic have built quite a strong case for the Jinn being, the same sort of spirits as a lot of the Babylonian demons and things like that. But they are basically nature spirits originally, which really means, sort of spirits which dwell, sort of in various places. Certain of them are known to dwell, sort of in water sources, under bridges, in trees, in old houses and various other places. And there are various classes of Jinn as well. I think there's about 7, each of which have their own, sort of kings and queens, and there's various sort of hierarchies within, this sort of Jinn law, as it were. But originally they don't seem to have been considered as just evil spirits, which they now have been, like a lot of various, indigenous pagan spirits, shall we say, have been demonised under later, sort of religious traditions, in the same way that's happened with various spirits, pagan spirits under Christianity. And it's the same thing really with the Jinn in Islamic law, but certain of them are, considered beneficent. I mean, and certainly within some of the more less orthodox sort of Sufi groups and things like that, they are, sort of seen as inspiring some of the Sufi poets and this sort of thing. And supposedly they can take on corporeal form and, sort of actually, sort of appear to people.
Blimey. So would it be fair to say a little bit more like the old sort of Greek definition of the daemon, that aren't necessarily inherently evil, but they are spirit forces?
I guess a little in some ways, although the Greek daemon I don't think are really personified as nature spirits in the same way, but I think there probably are similarities, yes.
I suppose the genio logo comes from Greek, and that's
the word, yes, genius loco, obviously spirit of the place, yeah. And I mean, certainly there are similarities to the Jinn with that, in that they are tied to certain places, it seems. As I say, some of them are, they come in old houses, some of them will live in, sort of rivers or streams or things like this, and most, throughout, the Near East, I mean, the belief these days is probably strongest in areas of North Africa, like Morocco, also in Turkey, in Egypt, Syria, and to also some degree in Cyprus as well.
Okay, that's interesting. I might come back to that a bit later on. But so, how would you say they differ from the Judeo-Christian sense of a demon then?
Well, there probably isn't that much difference, and I mean a lot of again within a lot of the early comparative literature, people have tried to link certain classes of jinn with the Shedim of Hebrew tradition, you know, and sort of said, you know, oh, you know, they're both hairy beings, they're both, you know, and tried to build up a case, you know, sort of a comparative case, but it's really, I think, these are the same sort of spirits, but just remembered under a different cultural setting.
Right, so like, sort of, it's that kind of thing, isn't it? It's a different identification of potentially the same kind of spirit, but in the different communities and societies and religions.
It is, and I mean, and just in the way that the Devas and Asuras, obviously, you know, sort of, if you look at India and you look at sort of, you know, Persian tradition, you know, one's considered evil in one and good in the other, and vice versa. And there seems to be a lot of that to do with jinn law as well, that certainly, you know, under the, you know, Islamic banner now, you know, they are considered more, generally speaking, evil spirits, but that wasn't certainly always the case.
Sure, man, we can argue that against the Judeo-Christian ideas of demons as well. They've not
Yeah,
been
of course.
seen as
Exactly.
different degrees of darkness, if you like. So, you mentioned that that's the kind of geographic, the area in which they are sort of most commonly talked about, are those who say they could be compared to anything from anywhere else in the world. Now, interestingly, obviously we're not going to talk about names or any details that give anything away, but I know you've had experience of somebody who may have fallen into that last little thing you mentioned about corporeal form. I mean, we know that this person will have no idea. There's nothing to give away who this person might be, but are you prepared to talk about that at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I've not, you know, I've known two people that have experiences with the jinn. I mean, one, she was born with a kareem, or kareen as it's known, which is like a personal jinn attendant spirit, which is passed down ancestrally, and this can be seen in sort of as similar to a lot of other ancestral spirits which are passed down in various other traditions, from, you know, sort of a lot of the Afrocentric traditions where you have a, you know, a mettet or personal loa, a personal spirit, and also within European witchcraft where there's traditions of the fetch or personal attendant spirit, again being sort of handed down, you know, sort of through different generations of witches. And with certainly the kareem or kareen, it's usually a female spirit, but not entirely. According to popular law, they're generally said to be troublesome rather than benevolent, but again, this doesn't seem to always be the case. That you know, there are, you know, sort of traditions of, you know, benevolent, you know, kareems that are, you know, sort of helpful. Yeah, and there's another friend of mine who had a lot of experience with jinn law and jinn magic within her ancestry, and also again has a form of a kareem, but it seems a little bit different in her case, which I have actually seen, you know, manifest physically in a and the closest I can sort of thing which people might know about, which I can, you know, sort of describe the experience as if people know the concept of the tulpa within Tibetan Buddhism, whereas you know, something can be created and actually be, you know, sort of take on physical form and be seen by, you know, other people.
Yes.
And I have actually seen this this person's, you know, sort of attendant jinn, you know, separately to them.
Can you describe what you saw?
It was a very, very shadowy figure because it was dark, but it was definitely human-sized, and generally speaking, the Jinn are said to, take on corporeal form and are said to live and die like human beings do, and sort of marry, raise families, and also there have been sort of various stories in folklore of human males and Jinn females sort of getting together and bearing offspring.
This is parallel to the Nephilim then?
Some people have tried to build parallels between the biblical, sort of Nephilim, which are written about in Enochian literature, the books, The Secrets of Enoch, and the Book of Enoch.
This is Enochian as opposed to John Dee's Enoch.
Yes, we should point that out, of course. That have tried to sort of, link the Jinn with, sort of fallen angels and then the offspring of the Nephilim. And there's certainly a lot of modern work going into this, although a lot of it does seem to be a little bit spurious. So it's a difficult thing to sort of, put that comparison there with certainty, shall we say, I think. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Going back to the the real world appearance of this particular figure, does it bear any resemblance to the person that it was attached to?
Yes, I would say it does. Certainly in my experience, that it does seem to be like a projection, almost of the person. Same sort of physical height and same sort of kind of outline features, long dark hair, which the person also possesses. So yes, I would say that it does bear a strong physical resemblance
it's
to
worth mentioning that person was actually in another country at the time, so clearly it wasn't them.
Yes,
they sneaked over to visit you overnight.
Yeah, no, that's
several thousand miles away.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was an interesting experience. What did you make of the experience?
It was very interesting, and I'm still not quite sure what conclusions to draw, to be perfectly honest, because it was breaking new ground for me. I've got to be honest.
So that the second person you've experienced has had connection?
Yes, as I say, the first, I knew that she had a personal attendant, Jinn, Kareen or Kareem, as it's known, because she's spoken to me about it and told me about how it was handed down, sort of down her family line, and usually these come down from female to female, which is the case in both these examples that we're talking about here.
Now, I know of the second person you mentioned, and I know that they are from the part of the world you previously mentioned, but was this other person as well from that part?
No, she's actually from Pakistan, which is another area. I mean, sort of Pakistan, because it's quite strongly Islamic these days, again does have quite a strong belief in the Jinn, and also some parts of India as well. I've come across it. I mean, although it's mainly sort of centred in sort of North Africa, Morocco, Turkey, Syria, Egypt, and those sort of areas around the Middle East and North Africa. That
so it's fair to say they're found where Islam had spread to.
It is really, yes. Yeah, again, it's become, sort of a cultural part of Islam, although, as I say, under a much demonised form.
What I find interesting, particularly with Africa, is, of course, the Sahara Desert makes such a huge difference. It creates almost like a division in Africa, the northern part above the Sahara. This is what we're talking about, this kind of thing. In southern Sahara, Africa, it tends to be much more kind of tribal spirituality. I mean, we've talked before, and regular listeners will know that Richard knows quite a lot about voodoo. So, can you see parallels between the idea of the Jinn and perhaps the lower in voodoo?
I can in certain areas. I'm a little bit cautious about sort of coming down on one particular side of the fence here, because as far as the history of voodoo or voodoo is concerned, particularly in Haiti, and in Africa, most scholars tend to deny that there's any Islamic influence. However, there are certain interesting parallels between certain classes of jinn and certain classes of lawar, or spirits within voodoo, in the fact that if you look at the petro spirits, which are largely derived from Congolese tradition in Africa that are now well established within Haiti, they do have certain aspects within common of certain classes of jinn, namely red eyes, which both are said to possess, and also that they are these type of spirits are often given some kind of offerings in order to avoid malfortune and deformity, which an illness, which again is a case in both a lot of these African spirits and the jinn as well. And there are, sort of one or two other more tentative parallels, which I won't really, those are certainly the main two. And people have, sort of tried to make this argument, but it remains a little bit of a moot point, I think. Again, sort of, it goes back to the fact that all of these spirits are pagan nature spirits. Sort of either ancestors personified through the natural world, or aspects of the natural world which are personified through, sort of streams, rivers, sort of rocks, mountains, etc., etc. So there's certainly a lot of comparisons, that do exist between, and similarities that do exist between jinn, certainly in more their pagan form, and a lot of indigenous spirits, sort of voodoo and elsewhere.
I can pause the recording, and so I need to find something very quickly. The red eye thing is interesting, as that kind of fits with most generalised demons as well.
It does.
Red eyes, the
yes.
Red eyes.
And certainly, sort of this is applied, to the more, sort of, shall we say, aggressive forms of jinn. As I say, there are, so I can't remember off the top of my head, but there are various, classes of jinn. It's only the petro spirits within voodoo that are said to, have, red eyes. They're said to be, very, very fierce, uncompromising and aggressive spirits. Obviously, the whole red eyes thing has, become a wider part of, sort of demonology and, sort of demons worldwide.
It certainly has. Is there anything that is unique to the jinn that you don't find anywhere else in other forms of non-human entities? Anything that's specifically to them?
Probably not really. I don't think there's anything which is completely unique to the jinn, which you're not going to find in any other forms of, sort of traditional spirits. As I say, because we've talked about the comparisons already, sort of. The jinn are said to be, according to Islamic law, they were, born of fire rather than, manufactured from clay like Adam was and the rest of the human race. And again, going back to the petro spirits in voodoo, they are all, regardless of their pre-existing African characteristics, by the time they became part of the petro pantheon in Haiti, they were all associated with with the element of fire. So, they are kind of fire spirits, sort of really now. But as I say, again, this is something which has been put on them, since, that their incorporation in Islamic law. They weren't all just fire spirits, sort of in, sort of pre-Islamic pagan law.
So we're kind of talking about... as we said before, reclassification of that which was already there to some respect, which is I always find interesting how different cultures identify essentially the similar or same kinds of energies, beings, spirits, whatever you want to call them, more dependent on their own cultural outlook. That these things seem to be actually very ancient.
Yes, they are. undoubtedly, I mean, you could probably trace this. The spirit forms which later became Jinn, Loa, or a host of other, kind of spirits in various pantheons around the world. I mean, they probably, they probably certainly predate written and oral history, and I would say these probably go back into prehistoric times with the origins
absolutely.
of, sort of primitive, sort of animism, where man first looked at his landscape and tried to, interact with it in a ritual sense.
And very often, kind of controversial question that always comes to mind for me is to what extent do we create these things ourselves in order to explain things that we don't understand or hadn't understood? I mean, I've had many an argument with people, and I still can maintain the same position when it comes to things like demons and possession and mental illness, that most of the time mental illness was not understood until very recently, and more often we were thought to be some kind of demonic possession, whereas now we have explanation for pretty much all the kind of strange, abreactive and strange activity humans can do, and all the odd things that can happen both physically and mentally. We can kind of explain most of them. So, I mean, it's controversial to say, but to what extent do you think that these things are created by us to explain things we don't understand? But I would also say that I don't think they all are.
That's a very good point, and I mean, certainly there are a lot of cases these days, as you say, of demonic possession, whether it be by Jinn or, because, Jinn will, sort of possess human beings in the same way as the voodoo spirits do, and various, and sort of various others. And certainly some of these cases may be looked at as mental illness, but then there are also recorded cases of people going to doctors and surgeons with, real physical ailments which cannot be explained by medical science, and certainly in cases where these people have been part of Islamic communities or things like this, they've gone to sort of a sorcerer who specialises in working with the jinn or removing the jinn from people, and that's been the only answer to actually make the person better. So I would certainly say that there are some cases where it's you probably cannot differentiate between what is a mental illness and what is something caused by the spirit. And again, this all goes back to cultural perceptions and what the person actually believes. Because if the person believes that
key,
they are possessed by a jinn or a spirit or whatever, it doesn't matter whether that does actually translate into reality, what they're actually feeling and what they're actually going through and what they're actually experiencing. Yes, they are possessed by this spirit because they are convinced they are.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people sort of can end up bringing these things upon themselves in I know you obviously about the whole aspect of people self-cursing themselves, which is very, very easy, surprisingly easy to do. So.
You do some ritual wrong, you bug it up and it goes back in yourself. I mean, that is one of the things that I often say, that I don't generally believe in external unwanted demonic or power possession, but on the other hand, if someone absolutely believes wholeheartedly they are possessed by some kind of force or spirit, and wholeheartedly believe that an exorcism is the only thing that's going to work for them, and they believe it's going to, then it will.
Of course.
Power of the mind.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
It is
exactly.
Obviously, with my field of work, what the mind can fool itself into believing is staggering sometimes. But I do think these things can be connected with and communicated with. But I don't tend to believe in the classic idea of the evil possession that makes you do daft, horrible things. I think that's kind of a bit too sort of horror film-esque. But that's only my point of view on that. So, I don't know if you can even answer this question, but I'm certainly aware that it seems they're very much a popular topic at the moment, the old Jinn.
They certainly seem to be, in the fact that there are a number of books starting to come out in English, whereas the references to the Jinn, if you go back in, sort of English publications of books, are comparatively rare. I mean, sort of if you go back to, for example, the turn of, 1900 into 20th century, I mean, people like Campbell Thompson, whose book on Semitic magic does mention quite a bit on Jinn lore. And also Westermarck's Ritual and Belief in Morocco, which was a two-volume set which came out in 1926, I think it was, is probably the biggest single catalogue of sort of Jinn lore, which goes into it in several hundred pages.
Wow.
But the problem is with the actual magical side of the Jinn and invoking Jinn and calling Jinn and working with them, like a sorcerer would. Most of these, the books that have been written are usually in Arabic.
Yes.
And very few have actually been translated into English. Yeah, recently the publisher Scarlet Imprint have brought out a book called Jinn Sorcery, which is by a guy called Rain Al-Alim, which is a pseudonym because the person didn't want to be known by their real name, which for the first time does actually translate and give translations from a number of private manuscripts which deal with Jinn magic and lore and the ways which you can invoke the Jinn for yourself if you wish to do so. But also I should mention Robert Lebling's book, Legends of the Fire Spirits, Jinn and Genies from Arabia to Zanzibar, which, although written as a popular, sort of paperback, is probably the best introduction to Jinn lore that you're going to find these days, which came out quite fairly recently, I think in 2012, and it's been later reprinted. But what Lebling has done is he's collected, sort of various stories and folklore from, sort of around the world, both orally and from some pretty obscure books. So sort of between them, those two books that I've just mentioned, certainly, in the modern printing area are the two best books, I should say, on Jinn lore if you wanted to sort of look into it more.
Yes, pretty impressive, the one from Scarlet Imprint. Although it looks like the imprint symbol's coming off at the bottom there, which is rather a shame.
Yes, yeah, I think it's going to slight rubbing, but yeah, a bit of a beautiful production.
The Scarlet Imprint author is actually an academic who studied Islamic literature at a university level, but obviously because of his university career didn't really want to be identified as writing books on magic as well. So it's a high authority in the area, I think.
Oh yes, certainly it's trustworthy material, I think, and I think that's only going to be the tip of the iceberg. I think that now that these things are opening up to a Western audience, that it could be the next sort of trendy thing among occult circles, just in the way that traditional, as I'll call it in inverted commas, witchcraft became a few years ago, as a reaction to Gardner's Wicca.
That does seem to be the fact. I think it is one of those things that's in vogue at the moment, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's increasing our occult knowledge is always a good thing, no matter what the topic or area is. But it is a fascinating topic. I think I'll something I'd like to perhaps return to at a later point, but that's it for this part of today's show. We just want to have a little conversation about the Jinn, because it's, as I say, they've become a popular topic at the moment, because I know Richard had some personal experience of people who have had very definite connections with Jinn, shall we say, that I thought would be an interesting conversation this afternoon. I managed to do the entire half an hour without even a single once mentioning gin and tonic, which I always tend to mention, so apologies I had to gin and tonic at some point. Okay, well that's this part of the show, and the second part we'll be doing a bit later on. Okay, here we are for the second part of Radio Hermetica's show this evening. I am now sitting, and so I'm standing actually, with my fellow committee members for the Nameless Art, and one interloper who's actually previously part of the committee, but he's with us again, Richard, from earlier on. So I thought we'd talk about the speakers that we've got, as two of them are actually here, and then the other four we can talk about as well. So, Richard, you are not part of the committee, but you're one of our speakers this time.
I am indeed.
So, we were talking a little bit earlier on about vaguely related material that's linked to, but what are you actually talking about, Conrad?
I'm going to be talking about the origins of sort of magic and sorcery within Haitian voodoo, which is now something which goes far beyond the confines of the religion itself.
So what can you tell us about it?
You'll have to wait for the lecture. As I say, it's going to be the origins of magic and sorcery and how it's developed within Haiti under the voodoo banner, but all of the various different influences that have come to bear, both African, European and indigenous.
Excellent. And one of the other speakers you've got is someone that Nikki found and introduced us to. He sounds like an interesting guy. Could you perhaps tell us a bit more about him?
Mr. Shadow Boy George Bowling. I think he wants to be known as George Hares now. But I used to watch him on YouTube. An Essex boy who's moved up to Manchester. He's got a very unique way about him, but he's very endearing. And he obviously really knows his stuff, and I was following him for a long time on YouTube. And he just happened to turn up at our conference last year, which was quite a surprise, a nice surprise. So I approached him, and he felt quite flattered to be asked if he'd like to be a speaker at this year's conference.
Essentially the theme of the conference itself is the origins of different magical traditions, and the idea of George really is that you can have your own origins of your own tradition, that you can start it yourself. His interest is in more traditional witchcraft, which we talked about last year, but it's his own approach, which is quite nice. So it doesn't have to be sort of dark times and mysterious from ancient times. You can have your own traditions which you start yourself. But talking of darker and ancient times, some of the other speakers you've got go way back in time, and I think quite possibly the earliest possible magical material is coming from Andy Collins.
Which is indeed.
Of course, Andy's one of our speakers again this year. He was at the conference last year and gave a little impromptu talk, didn't he, for about 20 minutes or so. So we thought having him as the official speaker this time, as well as the host, the what's the word?
MC for the day.
The MC for the day, thank you. So obviously you know Andy well, you know his kind of material. What's he really be talking about?
Well, he's going to be talking about some of the earliest magical traditions that we know about, going back to parts of the old town Siberia, which will really reveal the magical and ritual side to a lot of the material that's gone into his recent books to do with Cygnus, which have also looked into the legacy of some people called the Denisovans and a lot of other early races which are becoming looked into a lot more now. So he's going to be looking at sort of magic going back at least probably sort of 10, 15, maybe even 20,000 years ago.
So it's literally the origins of magic itself, along with civilization almost.
Yes, pretty much, yeah.
So would you know much about the
Denisovans?
Those guys?
No, you'll have to speak to Andrew more on that. I mean, basically what they are is almost like one of the lost linking races between modern anatomical humans and Neanderthals.
Right.
And you know, sort of proto-humans, and this race seemed to have kind of originated in, you know, sort of Siberia, Russian steppes. I would say they're very much an Asiatic race. And he's also going to be talking about how their influence has come out and influenced a lot of other civilisations, such as Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, which he's also made a big subject of one of his books.
The Göbekli Tepe stuff is quite fascinating in itself. I think we've talked about that before. So it is going back to the origins of almost civilization and magic, which of course are very much tied together anyway.
They are indeed, yes.
Another speaker we have is Mog Morgan, who will be talking about origins of the Egyptian magic, which seems to play an important part in most magical traditions anyway. I think it said before, it may have been Mog himself, that sort of 9 out of 10 magical traditions link back to Egypt anyway.
Very true.
Do you know much about the area he's talking about? I know we keep referring to you, but you know this guy. It's about Hecate, I think.
Yeah, not that much. I mean, obviously, yeah, he's going to talk about Hek or Heket, which is, the closest word we have in ancient Egyptian for something which we would term magic. And he's going to talk about the origins of that, and obviously how it's come to influence, sort of virtually every magical system since.
So that'd be very much the beginnings of most of the stuff that we are very interested in ourselves now.
Certainly, yes.
And who the hell's next? Oh, Paul. Can you talk about Paul as well?
Paul Weston, an old friend of mine who used to live in Essex, he's going to be talking about the origins of Aleister Crowley's Thelema from the point of view of the Book of the Law, which is Crowley's most famous channel text, which was received by his Scarlet Woman partner at the time in 1904.
This is really one of the foundations of doctrines, as you say, of Crowley's own approach to magic.
Yes.
To me, it kind of marks a break away from all the Golden Dawn-based stuff, the Hermetic stuff that you worked with previously.
Yes, very much
magic. So, although it's not the beginning of Crowley, it's certainly the fork, if you like, in changing direction, which I think is an important area. The Book of the Law itself is a mysterious text, to say the least. Ever been produced over a number of nights, I think it was?
Yeah, 3 nights I think it was, or 3 days, yeah, certainly.
Was it automatic writing, or was it kind of...
It was received in trance via his Scarlet Woman at the time. Whose name I dreadfully forget. I should remember this. And she basically went into trance, and he transcribed, what she was saying.
It's interesting.
Rose
stuff.
Edith.
Rose Kelly. Rose Kelly. Yeah, that's the woman. Sorry, I should have remembered that.
Well, that's one of those things we can forgive you today. And of course, Mog is also known for Mandrake of Oxford, the publishing house.
Yes, certainly. I mean, Mog's brought out a lot of great books, not just on Egyptian magic, which is obviously his, sort of main subject, but on a number of other, sort of occult themes and personalities over the years, which is now quite a long-standing publishing house.
Which is excellent if you have a table and selling these books, of course, so a chance to pick up some interesting titles there as well. Speaking of people who are selling and bookstores, we have hopefully returning Troy books, the Gemma and Jane. So that's something to look forward to as well. They've got some new titles out as well, so hopefully they'll be bringing those along. So, and anyone who missed last year's conference, I don't know where you were, but would someone like to speak about who Gemma and Jane are?
Gemma Gary has come to the sort of public notice in recent years as a traditional witch living and working in Cornwall, where she has, sort of learnt and plied her craft now for a number of years. I think it was 2008 that her first book,
yes.
Cornish Witchcraft, A Book of Ways, came out, which details the sort of methods she uses, and her partner Jane supplies the photography for the books, and also works at Troy Books along with Gemma, producing a lot of interesting titles on witchcraft from both old sources and new.
Yeah, indeed, and this does mark the 10th anniversary of her book, the very first book.
Indeed it does, yes.
Witchcraft, Book of Ways. And apparently there is going to be an anniversary edition with some additional material, and the book itself has been rearranged, so hopefully we'll have copies of that you should be selling there as well, so there's a chance to pick up that, and of course get the book signed, because she's there, hopefully. Who else have we got who's selling stalls? I mean, the ladies here are
Obviously
responsible
myself,
for
I'll
that.
be running Man, Myth and Magic,
Of course,
which will be
absolutely.
selling second-hand books on occult or magic and related subjects.
Actually, and Richard's got probably some of the best prices you'll find, and that's being a buyer of his books. I can tell that's definitely the case. So, worth bringing on a few quid with you. But who else have we got stalls?
Well,
ladies?
we've got your good self, Mr. Mercer, so perhaps you'd like
We'll
to
get
say a
back to
few
you in a
words
moment.
about
I'm coming
your
last.
book.
I'll come last.
Oh, right, okay. Yes, we've got Tabitha's Cottage there, who will be selling handmade traditional crafts. We've also got Cunning Wilbert, who will be there, and Nick is quite an expert in the field of making amulets and various bits and
Cunning
pieces for
Wilbur, who's
sale.
Cunning Wilbur?
It is Cunning Wilbert, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's Nicky.
Oh, that's
Her
you.
name-
So you've called yourself Cunning Wilbur?
This is a
Wilbert's
revelation,
Cottage.
guys. This is news to us. We didn't know
Wilbert's
this.
Cottage.
Breaking news.
There
Yes.
we go. Exclusive to the
You have to
show.
really cut and shut this, aren't you?
That's
Yeah,
fine.
so we've also got Wilbert's Cottage there, which will have some traditional...
I'm not actually bringing the cottage because it might take a bit of an effort, but it's...
say?
Wilbert's Cottage, that's fine.
Yeah, right. And also with Nikki, if there's any personalised items you'd like to have made, she'll be able to make them for you as well. So you'll be able to have a chat with her in the breaks. We also have
Might get
beautiful...
10-year lead time. But
We also have hot vegan food on sale, and there'll be refreshments all day long. The venue is quite large. We have outside gardens that will be open to the public for yourselves, weather permitting. We also have stalls downstairs, the conference is upstairs with all the amenities, and there is lifts for disabled people. The parking will be off-road, but the venue is very close to the local station, the local airport and the local town. Should you not want to stay in during the lunch break, there are many pubs and taverns around the area which you're welcome to go to. And there will be Q&A at the end of the conference with all of our 6 speakers, which will be quite interesting.
Also, we have the chef of our excellent food that we're going to be enjoying on the day. She's quite an accomplished cook. Do you want to tell us about the interesting delicacies you're going to be serving?
I shall be doing a nice vegan kebab, which is made of seitan. It's a meat substitute. We found that working in the cafe that even hardcore men that like their kebabs at 2 o'clock in the morning with lots of curry sauce or chilli sauce or whatever they have, really like it. Very
Yeah.
popular.
I can honestly say I really liked it, and I'm confirmed carnivore.
Yes, we had it for dinner this evening.
Yeah, we're all
It's just
ready.
obviously, I'm not saying everybody who are interested in this kind of subject. A lot of people are vegans and vegetarians and alternatives, but it's a good way of serving food that anybody can eat and keeping things a bit more ethical, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's a good substitute. It's not like giving you a lettuce sandwich or the thing that everybody thinks veganism is. It's just a tasty alternative. So.
Absolutely, we're all impressed with what we had for dinner this evening. I mean, I haven't eaten red meat for donkey's years, but from what I can remember of a kebab, that was very, very similar. I wouldn't have known the
Texture's
difference.
very similar.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the feedback we kind of get at the cafe. So, that should be served on the day.
I'm sure looking forward to that because we enjoyed it this evening. And of course, the last speaker for the day, not last as in the rundown, although one I haven't mentioned yet, is my good self, which you guys probably know from previous shows. I've talked about Enochian magic on a number of occasions. Well, my talk is about the origins of Enochian magic with Dr. John Dee himself, how it all really first came about. And those of you who've listened before know I've read a book, Liber Coronzon, which is effectively about the origins of Enochian magic, but it also deals with practical ways of working with Enochian, which I will probably touch on in my talk. So, but just to give everyone a background, an idea of how it all came about with Dr. John Dee, and that will be my talk. So what else have we got going on today? That would be nothing.
Well, we've got talks and stalls.
Yeah.
Well, we find that, I
Signing.
mean, last time people came in, there's a lot of people that get to know each other, like George came in. He
Networking.
lives in Manchester and had met a lot of people that he speaks to and a lot of his friends. You know, you get friends on Facebook you never speak to, and because you're in that kind of area that you know, you might be in a, we had people from Canada last year in America, right? So it's nice to meet up with people that you probably, you know, don't put a face to, but you kind of know sort of it, and it was really nice seeing people catch up with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully there'll be a lot of kind of networking as well, and people making contacts, and you know, we might find some people that are very interested in speaking at next year's conference. It's just a really good place for networking and to meet people that are like-minded to a degree, because most people who like this kind of thing don't advertise it, and they probably don't look like they are interested in this kind of thing. So unless you actually know people, you get to know people for whatever reason, and then, you know, become friends with them and whatever. You don't. Some people, you know, are very solitary. They don't get to meet people. It's a nice opportunity to go there and not feel like a weirdo that you do.
Absolutely.
And, you know, to feel comfortable around people and just have a good day of something that's a very niche market that we don't normally get exposed to that often, especially with the kind of quality of speakers we're getting in the talks.
Yes, quite true. Although one thing I noticed definitely was last year's conference was how the people were talking to each other. The people were hanging around together and discussing stuff.
It was really nice.
Like-minded
Exactly.
people.
Exactly.
So we've been a bit of a way show in that respect in this area of Essex, because up until we started these events, they were very few and far between. We as a group used to have to perhaps go down to Cornwall or venture up to London to hear these sort of talks, whereas South East Essex now is big up and coming, and we've got a little niche here now where we can bring people together, so it's a bit of a first for our area.
I think it's a good thing as well, because you get some quite high profile people that are involved in this actually attending the conference, and it's nice to see these kind of people actually coming along to our conference, and you know, get the opportunity to speak to people you wouldn't normally. So it's just a really good day.
Yeah, and certainly it's a chance to learn stuff you wouldn't know before, because probably you might have an interest in one or two of the topics that we're talking about, but may not know all 6 of them. So it's a chance to get to know different areas of magic that you might not even know about. So to say that the general theme, as you were saying before, is the origins of stuff, but of course there are other forms of magic that we kind of have a chance to even talk about. But I think we're covering quite a large area, from a sort of homegrown rural magic with George to the ancient origins, things like with Morgan and Andy. Also very specific, very famous figures like Alistair Crowley with Paul Weston's talk, and then that kind of sort of more mysterious stuff that's become quite popular, things like the voodoo with Richard, and then myself with a very specific area of magic that came out of the blue almost, although there are precursors to knocking that go back some time. So it's all trying to cover the different bases, different kinds of magical traditions that may be so far apart that it's not like anyone's going to know all of them intimately, so hopefully people will learn something they don't even know about, which is kind of the idea as well. So the important thing for everybody, of course, is the cost of the tickets.
Yes, and they're quite cost effective really. You've got 6 international speakers, a beautiful venue. So we've got early bird tickets that are on sale. They're only £30, and that will go on until the 30th of July. After that, they're going up to £35.
And what is the price on the door, assuming they're not sold?
If the door price will be £35 as well, so it's a good idea to try and get your tickets in early and secure your seat, because also it is limited availability, I have to stress. And last year we were fortunate enough to have total sell-out, so you know, don't miss out.
Don't miss your chance.
No.
It's 125 people the venue holds. It sounds like a lot, but it was nice sized venue. Everyone's on microphones, so you can hear everybody nice and clearly. There's always PowerPoint presentations, so things to look at as well, not just the speakers to stare at. There's actually things you look at on the wall, so make it more interesting.
Another thing to mention as well, obviously the speakers got the opportunity to have their own stalls. So George is having a stall, George Bowling, and he's sharing it with Ash. From Scottish Traditional Ways, I think they're called, and he produces some really nice goods as well, some really authentic nice goods. But obviously the speakers have got the opportunity to have a stall, so either you can buy things from them if they're selling them you know, as in their books, or just have the opportunity to speak to them as well
So
during the breaks, which is nice.
Absolutely, and those speakers who are published, you can get your book signed, because I imagine I certainly have copies of my books. I've written a few, and other writers who are speakers will be there to sign them and dedicate them to you as well, of course, which is always quite nice.
And of course during the breaks we do have the downstairs, which is open to you all, and there'll be various stalls and wares down there as well for you to have a browse and to network and to perhaps buy a few things. So it's quite a full-on day, and like all these things, the day does go quick, but it's the most enjoyable day, so we look forward to seeing you.
And the time's running, doors are opening at 9, I believe?
The doors are opening at 9 o'clock, and we think the event's going to finish round up about 6, and it'll end up with Q&A with all the speakers.
Each speaker will speak for about 40 minutes. We break between all the speakers, so there's plenty of time for get a cup of tea, cup of coffee, go to the loo, etc. They don't have to rush around. Sometimes you find these things get a bit too packed in, but we've got a nice sort of run through for the day. So.
And it's not far from London either, so it's pretty central.
Yeah, we'll quickly just briefly cover that for transport reasons. If you're not a driver, you can get to the venue quite easy from both Southend Central and Southend Victoria stations. You can get a train from London from Fenchurch Street to Southend Central, and from Liverpool Street to Southend Victoria. Both are no more than 10-minute walk away.
That's correct.
Easily get to.
We've got the local airport as well up the road.
Indeed.
And that's not far off either, so...
And we did have people flying to the airport last year, so we came specifically.
Yeah, we had people from Scotland, didn't we? Canada.
Netherlands.
Yes, and the Netherlands.
Yes.
So we look forward to seeing you. Some of you might even decide to spend the weekend in Southend for the day as well if you're coming away off. There is some lovely bed and breakfasts along the seafront, and Southend does have one of the longest piers in the world. So those of you who've not ever given a visit to Southend might decide to make a weekend of it, and then perhaps have the day at the beautiful conference and then spend a day down the seafront, go for a walk on the pier, taking all the sights and sounds, because Southend's quite an up-and-coming city now.
Yeah, I mean, there is actually a bit of a nightlife as well.
Oh, there's a bit of a nightlife, and there's casinos for those of you that want to have a little bit of a flutter. 2 lovely casinos in the town. Bowling alley, the pier, some beautiful restaurants,
Cinema,
pubs, clubs,
Cinema 5 minutes away, yeah.
Yeah, and there's also, for those of you who are still young at heart, there's an amazing theme park called Adventure Island, and that's got all the thrills and spills of the fair, and that's a good day out as well. So, you know, I would advise those of you that are coming away, it might as well make a weekend of it and book yourself in for a B&B and just enjoy the whole weekend.
So this is very much the plan. This is our second conference, and if it goes well, we will definitely be doing the same thing next year as well. So that is the hope, and obviously not about a theme yet or anything, but we try to get an idea of a theme for these, not just a random bunch of people talking, but we might run out of themes and end up being random bunches after all. But so this is, say, our second one, so hopefully we'll going to have another one next year. So let's just get the details of where people can find out information about it, and how, of course, importantly, where to book your tickets from.
Well, there's a few ways that you can find us. First of all, we do have our own Facebook page, and you'll be able to get contact through that. Those of you that buy Nexus magazine, we do have an advert running in the Nexus magazine as well. That's a magazine that's from Duncan Rhodes in Australia. Very popular magazine, and Marcus Allen is the publisher in England. And I said we've got an advert in there. Mr. Andrew Collins, who has his EarthQuest newsletter, also has a lot of details on there, and we do have Eventbrite for the tickets. Nikki, if you'd like to tell people about the tickets, please.
Yeah, if you go onto Eventbrite and just put in the Nameless Arte Conference 2018, you should be able to find the ticket link quite easily. Also, if you go onto our Facebook group, there's a Facebook page, but there's also an event page, again, Nameless Arte 2018, which will put the links already on there, so you can just go through from there.
Just to clarify, that's Nameless Art, art with an E on the end, so ARTE.
Yes.
So you can find us.
And the venue is the Balmoral Centre, Salisbury Avenue, Westcliff-on-Sea, Essex. and they also have a website, and if you was to click that, we're also advertising with them, and they do have a video of the venue. So those of you that go on to the Balmoral website, you can have a live pan round from a video, so you can see exactly where the venue is and have a good look at whereabouts you'll be coming.
They also have refurbished toilets, which are very nice.
Yes.
Yes, they do, and it's a
The
very
important
nice
facilities
venue.
in
Yep.
those, yes.
Yes.
And of course, the most important thing of all, the date. It is the 29th of September, so put it in your diary. It's the 29th of September, the Nameless Arte Conference in Southend. Well, that's about it, guys. We've had a conversation earlier about the Jinn, and now we'll just give you a bit of a rundown of what's going to happen with our conference in September. We're doing it now because it's a few months away, but obviously we want you guys to know about it and hopefully get tickets and come along. We'll all be there, so you can come and listen to us waffling on about our various topics. Just to give you a quick rundown again of exactly who we've got speaking. First of all, we've got myself, Andy Mercer, talking about Enochian magic. Richard Wall is talking about
Haitian magic and sorcery.
Haitian magic and sorcery. Andy Collins is talking about the Denisovans, thank you.
Yeah, and the origins of magic in Siberia.
The origins of magic in Siberia. Bob Morgan is talking about the origins, effectively, of Egyptian magic, heck. And Paul Weston is talking about Alistair Crowley's Book of the Law, which is the origins, especially of Thelema, in a sense. And George is talking about the idea, effectively, that you can create your own tradition. That what you do for yourself is a tradition in itself. You might be the first generation of that tradition, but you can pass the tradition down to your children, etc., or members of your family. So it brings it kind of home back to individuals rather than being this big grand project as well. So that's our speakers for the day. So we also had stall holders, including Troy Books, Magic of Oxford, Man, Myth and Magic, and The Cottage, whose name I've forgotten.
Cunning Wilbur.
Cunning Wilbert, yes, which is our good Nicky here to laugh your head off.
Was it Wilbur?
William and Betty, who used to live in the house.
They're named
Named
after
after
the
them.
old occupants of her house.
Yep.
And there'll be other stall holders. We've got at least a couple more in the pipeline, but that's the conference. Just very briefly mention, as I have to, it's my show, I'm allowed to. I'm actually speaking at another conference 2 weeks before that in Seattle. It's the Esoteric Book Fair conference, where I'll be attending and talking about the origins of the Citra Akra, which is the Klipothic other side from the Kabbalah. So if you're in America, which I know quite a few of our audience are, and you're in the Seattle area, I'm speaking 2 weeks before, and it's the 14th and 15th of September. So if you're in Seattle, by all means come along to the Esoteric Book Conference, run by Mortlake & Co., which is William Keisel's Orobis Press publishing. That's it from us for this month. So as usual, I have got an idea of who my guest is going to be for next month, and I usually say I've not got a clue, but this time I have, so I'm going to sort out a date and time for recording, so hopefully you'll find that one interesting. But until then, it's goodbye from me and goodbye from the conference committee members sitting in this room here. Goodbye.